She gave me a public ultimatum in front of 200 people at her bank's gala. Stay and listen or walk away forever. I chose to walk. What I discovered next about my wife's secret life made me realize that humiliating exit was exactly what she wanted. The woman I'd loved for 15 years had been planning my destruction for months, and my own son was helping her do it. My name is Arthur Beaumont. I'm 42 years old, and I've been running my own IT consulting business for the past 8 years. Nothing fancy, just me and 2 part-time contractors helping small businesses get their tech sorted out. It pays the bills and gives me flexibility to be around for my kids. That used to matter to my wife, Vivian. Used to. Vivian works as a senior credit manager at First National Bank downtown. She's always been ambitious, driven in ways that I admired when we first met 15 years ago. Back then, she'd talk about her future like we were building something together. Somewhere along the line, those conversations became her talking about her future, and I became background noise. We have 3 kids. Leo's 16 and thinks he knows everything. Clara's 14 and actually might, and Hugo's 8 with a laugh that could cure cancer. They're the reason I stayed as long as I did, hoping things would get better. The first real warning sign came 3 months ago. Leo started acting weird around me, avoiding eye contact, giving me these looks like I disappointed him somehow. When I asked what was wrong, he'd just shrug and say nothing, Dad. In that tone teenagers use when they mean everything. Then there was the night Vivian came home for what she called a mandatory bank retreat with a new haircut, new clothes, and this glow about her that I hadn't seen in years. She was practically humming as she unpacked her bag. When I commented on how good she looked, she barely acknowledged me. Just trying some new things, she said, not meeting my eyes. I wanted to believe it was a good sign that maybe she was working on herself for us. But something felt off. The way she held herself differently, like she had a secret that made her feel powerful. The breaking point came last Tuesday morning. Hugo had another one of his episodes, wetting the bed and crying about monsters in his dreams. The kid's been struggling ever since Vivian started working late every night. But when I mentioned it to her, she brushed it off. He's just going through a phase, she said, checking her phone for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. Kids are resilient. He's 8, Vivian. He needs his mom. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Cold calculation. Maybe he needs a father who doesn't baby him so much, she said. That hit me like a slap. I've always been the one getting up with sick kids, going to parent-teacher conferences, coaching Little League. But according to Vivian, I was the problem. That night, I found her in the garage, talking quietly on her phone. She didn't see me at first, and I heard her laugh in a way she hadn't laughed with me in years. I know, she was saying, but it won't be much longer. Trust me. When she noticed me standing there, she ended the call quickly. Work stuff? She said, but her cheeks were flushed. I nodded and went back inside, but something had shifted. The foundation we'd built our life on felt like it was starting to crumble. I didn't know how to stop it. What I didn't know was that it had already collapsed. I was just the last one to find out. The invitation came through email on a Thursday morning. First National Bank Annual Client Appreciation Gala. Join us for an evening of celebration. What caught my attention wasn't the fancy wording, but the personal note at the bottom from Vivian. Arthur, please come. I have something important to share with everyone. Something important to share with everyone. Not with me privately, not with our family first. With everyone. I should have trusted my gut and stayed home. But curiosity got the better of me. Maybe this was her way of trying to reconnect to include me in her professional world again. The gala was held at the Riverside Convention Center, all crystal chandeliers and marble floors. I felt out of place in my best suit, which suddenly seemed dated compared to the designer threads everyone else was wearing. Vivian looked stunning in a red evening gown I'd never seen before, mingling with colleagues and clients like she owned the place. Arthur Beaumont, she called out when she spotted me, her voice carrying across the room. Everyone, I'd like you to meet my husband. The way she said husband made it sound like a job title she was announcing a resignation from. She guided me to the front of the room where a small stage had been set up. My stomach started churning as she took the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, Vivian began, her voice steady and confident. Tonight is about more than celebrating our bank's success. It's about honesty, about being true to ourselves and the people in our lives. I felt like I was watching a car accident in slow motion. I've been living a lie, she continued, her eyes finding mine in the crowd, pretending to be someone I'm not, staying in a situation that no longer serves either of us. The room went dead silent. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd react. Arthur, she said, speaking directly to me now. I'm giving you a choice right here, right now, in front of all these people. You can stay and listen to what I have to say, or you can walk away. But if you walk away, you walk away forever. Time seemed to freeze. This woman I'd loved for 15 years, the mother of my children, was giving me a public ultimatum, like I was some kind of business transaction that needed resolving. I looked around the room at all these strangers watching my marriage implode, like it was dinner theater. Then I looked at Vivian, standing there with that cold confidence, waiting for me to beg or plead or make a scene. Instead, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my car keys, and let them catch the light as I held them up. I choose door number 2. I said loud enough for everyone to hear. Then I turned and walked out, leaving Vivian standing on that stage with her ultimatum and her audience. I didn't know it yet, but that was the smartest thing I'd done in months. I drove around for 2 hours after leaving that circus at the convention center. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from pure adrenaline. 20 years of marriage, and she chose to end it like some kind of corporate presentation. When I finally got home, the house felt different, empty, even though the kids were upstairs. Leo was in his room with the door closed, music bleeding through the walls. Clara was doing homework at the kitchen table, but she looked up when I walked in. Dad, where's Mom? She asked. Still at her work thing, I said, trying to keep my voice level. How's Hugo? He had another nightmare. He's been asking for you. I found my youngest son curled up in his bed, still whimpering softly. When he saw me, he reached out with both arms. Daddy, the monsters came back. He whispered, It's okay, buddy. Daddy's here now. As I held him, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You need to see this. Check your email. I waited until Hugo fell back asleep, then went to my home office. The email contained a video file with no message, just a timestamp from earlier that evening. I hesitated before clicking play. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. The video showed Vivian in what looked like a hotel room, still wearing that red dress. But she wasn't alone. A man I recognized as Alistair Moreau, one of the bank's investment advisors, was with her. They were intimate, talking quietly, and I could hear fragments of their conversation. Did exactly what you said he would, Vivian was saying, laughing. Walked right out like a whipped dog, Alistair replied. Phase 1 complete, then. Now we move to the legal stuff. The kids won't be a problem, Vivian continued. Leo's already on my side. He knows his father's a loser. I stopped the video. My own son, turned against me by his mother's manipulation. But there was more. Bank documents spread across the hotel bed, our joint account statements, even papers about our house. They weren't just planning an affair. They were planning my complete financial destruction. I copied everything to a secure drive and deleted the email. Tomorrow, I'd figure out who sent it and why. Tonight, I had to process the fact that the woman I'd loved had been systematically destroying our family for months. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was realizing that Hugo's nightmares, Leo's attitude, even Clara's worried looks. They'd all been trying to tell me something was wrong, and I'd been too blind to see it. Well, I wasn't blind anymore. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the one place I knew I could think clearly. My friend Marcus's auto shop. We've been buddies since high school, and his garage had always been my sanctuary when life got complicated. You look like hell, Marcus said when I walked in, wiping grease off his hands. I told him everything. The gala, the video, the financial documents. Marcus listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or shaking his head. Man, that's heavy, he said when I finished. What are you going to do? Before I could answer, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression changed. I need to take this, he said, stepping outside. Through the garage window, I could see him talking animatedly, gesturing with his free hand. Something about his body language bothered me, but I couldn't put my finger on what. When he came back in, he seemed different, more nervous. "Look, Arthur," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Maybe you should just let this go. Divorce happens, man. Don't make it ugly. Let go. Marcus, she's been planning this for months. She's turned my own son against me. Sometimes people grow apart," he said, echoing something that sounded rehearsed. "Maybe it's better to just move on quietly." That's when it hit me. The phone call. The sudden change in attitude. The way he kept checking his phone. "How long?" I asked. "How long?" "What? How long have you been talking to her?" Marcus's face went pale. "Arthur, it's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." He sighed heavily. "She approached me last month. Said you were having problems, that she was worried about you. She just wanted to make sure you had support, and she offered you what in return?" Marcus looked at the floor. "My shop's been struggling. She said the bank could help with refinancing, maybe extend my loan terms. There was my best friend bought and paid for." "Get out," I said quietly. "Arthur, please," Marcus pleaded. "Get out of my sight before I do something we'll both regret." As I drove away from Marcus's shop, I realized the scope of Vivian's planning. She hadn't just been preparing to leave me. She'd been isolating me, turning my own support system against me. But she'd made one mistake. She assumed I'd roll over and take it. Time to prove her wrong. When I walked in the coffee shop on 5th Street, I spotted Eleanor immediately. Vivian's younger sister looked exactly like her, except without the cold calculation that had taken over Vivian's features. Eleanor had texted me the night before. "We need to talk." "Come alone, Arthur," she said as I sat down across from her. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would help me." I admitted, "You and Vivian haven't exactly been close lately." Eleanor laughed bitterly. "That's because I called her out on her behavior 6 months ago. She cut me off completely after that." She slid a manila folder across the table. "Everything you need to know is in there. Bank records, hotel receipts, even recordings." Recordings. Vivian's always been careless when she thinks she's in control. She butt-dialed me 3 weeks ago during one of her planning sessions with Alistair. I recorded the whole conversation. I opened a folder and felt my blood pressure spike. Credit card statements showing regular payments to the same hotel. Cash withdrawals from our joint account that I'd never authorized. And most damaging of all, a document titled Asset Distribution Plan with Alistair's law firm, letterhead. She's been siphoning money for 8 months. Eleanor explained, small amounts at first, then larger ones. She opened accounts in her name only. Moved funds from your business account. Even took out a loan against your house without your signature. How is that legal? It's not. That's forgery. And Alistair's been helping her do it. But there's more. Eleanor pulled out another set of papers. "Remember your Aunt Patricia's inheritance last year? The one Vivian said never came through." I nodded. Aunt Patricia had been my father's sister. A sweet old lady who'd always treated me like a son. It came through. $50,000 made out to both of you. Vivian intercepted the check, forged your signature, and deposited it in one of her private accounts. My hand was shaking as I looked at the bank deposit slip. There was my signature, or a pretty good imitation of it. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. Eleanor's expression hardened. "Because she's destroying those kids. Leo's become a manipulative little monster, following her example. Hugo's falling apart, and Clara's caught in the middle trying to hold everyone together." She leaned forward, but mostly because she crossed the line. "She told me you were abusive, Arthur. She's planning to file false domestic violence charges to get full custody and make sure you get nothing in the divorce." The coffee shop seemed to spin around me. She said what? "She's building a case, taking photos of bruises she gave herself, collecting witness statements from people like Marcus who will say whatever she wants them to say." I thought about Hugo's nightmares, about the fear in his eyes. Had she been telling him his father was dangerous? "There's a lawyer," Eleanor continued. "Someone who specializes in financial fraud cases. Her name's Beatrice Vance, and she's expecting a call." I took the business card she offered. My mind racing. This wasn't just a marriage ending badly. This was a systematic destruction of everything I'd worked for, everything I cared about. "Thank you," I said quietly. "Don't thank me yet," Eleanor replied. "Thank me when those kids are safe." Beatrice Vance's office was nothing like the slick corporate spaces I'd imagined. It was functional, no nonsense, with law books stacked everywhere and a desk that looked like it had survived several decades of legal warfare. "Mr. Beaumont," she said, shaking my hand with a grip that could split timber. Eleanor filled me in on the basics. "Show me what you've got." I spread everything across her conference table. The financial records, the forged documents, the recordings Eleanor had provided. Beatrice reviewed each item methodically, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. "This is good," she said finally. "Very good. Your wife made a classic mistake. She assumed you'd roll over and play dead while she robbed you blind. What can we do? First, we freeze everything. Joint accounts, business accounts, even her private accounts. Once we prove the money came from marital assets, then we file for emergency custody of the children, citing parental alienation and emotional abuse." My heart jumped. "You think we can get the kids? Hugo's therapist records alone will be enough to show the damage being done. But Arthur, I need you to understand something. This is going to get ugly. She's going to fight back hard, and she's going to try to destroy your reputation in the process. Let her try." Beatrice smiled for the first time since I'd walked in. "Good, because tomorrow morning we're going to hit her with a legal tsunami she never saw coming." The next 18 hours were a blur of paperwork, affidavits, and strategic planning. Beatrice worked with the precision of a surgeon and the ruthlessness of a general. By Thursday morning, we were ready. At exactly 9 a.m., a process server walked into First National Bank and handed Vivian a stack of papers while she was conducting a client meeting. Emergency injunction, freezing all assets, petition for full custody, and the crown jewel. Criminal fraud charges being filed with the district attorney's office. My phone started ringing 10 minutes later. "Arthur, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Vivian's voice was shrill, panicked. "Why I should have done months ago, fighting back. You can't prove any of this." "Actually, I can. Every forged signature, every fraudulent transfer, every lie you told. I've got it all, Vivian, including the recording of you planning my downfall." The silence on the other end stretched for a long moment. "The kids will never forgive you for this," she said finally. "The kids are going to learn what integrity looks like. Something you should have taught them yourself." I hung up and turned to Beatrice, who was watching with approval. "Phase 1 complete," she said. "Now the real work begins." The custody hearing was set for Thursday morning, but Wednesday night brought an unexpected visitor. Clara knocked on my temporary apartment door at 9 p.m. Her eyes red from crying. "Dad, I need to tell you something," she said as I let her in. "What is it, sweetheart?" "Mom's been coaching Leo. She's been telling him things about you. Lies about how you've been holding our family back, how you're not ambitious enough for her anymore." I sat down next to my daughter on the couch. "What kind of things?" "She said you were jealous of her success, that you were trying to sabotage her career. She even showed him fake text messages that she said were from you, threatening her." My blood ran cold. "Fake messages?" "I saw her making them on her computer. There's this app that lets you create fake text conversations. She's been building a whole file of them." Clara pulled out her phone, but I recorded some of their conversations. I wasn't trying to spy, but they were talking in the kitchen, and I was doing homework right around the corner. The recording was damning. Vivian's voice was clear. "Leo, when the judge asks you who you want to live with, you need to say me. Your father's not stable anymore. He's been drinking too much, staying out late." Leo's response broke my heart. "But Dad doesn't drink, Mom." "That's because you don't see what happens when you're asleep. Trust me, honey. I'm trying to protect you and your siblings." I hugged Clara tightly. "You're incredibly brave for bringing this to me. There's more, Dad. Hugo's been asking me about the monsters in his dreams. He described them, and they all look like the man Mom's been bringing to the house when you're not there. Alistair. She'd been traumatizing our 8-year-old son by exposing him to her affair partner." "What about Leo? Is he really on her side?" Clara shook her head. "He's confused and scared. Mom promised him a car and college money if he supported her story. But last night, I heard him crying in his room. I think he knows it's wrong." The next morning at the courthouse, I watched Vivian walk in with Alistair and her attorney. She was dressed conservatively, playing the role of the victimized wife perfectly. But I had something she didn't expect. When the judge called the first witness, Beatrice stood up. "Your Honor, we'd like to call Clara Beaumont to testify." Vivian's face went white. She whispered frantically to her lawyer, but it was too late. Clara walked to the witness stand with the composure of someone twice her age. She answered every question honestly, clearly, and devastatingly. The recordings she'd made were admitted as evidence. And when she described finding her mother creating fake text messages, even Vivian's attorney looked defeated. "And what would you like to happen, Clara?" the judge asked gently. "I want to live with my dad, Your Honor. He's the one who's been taking care of us while Mom was planning her new life. Hugo needs him, and honestly, so do I." When court recessed for lunch, Leo approached me in the hallway. His face was streaked with tears. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't want to lie, but she said you might go to jail if I didn't help her." I pulled my son into a hug that felt like it lasted forever. "It's okay, Leo. You were trying to protect the family. That's what good men do." That afternoon, Leo took the stand and told the truth about the coaching, the bribes, the fear his mother had instilled in him. By the time he finished, even the court reporter was wiping her eyes. The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. Temporary full custody to the father with supervised visitation for the mother pending further investigation into allegations of parental alienation and fraud. As we walked out of the courthouse together, all three of my children by my side, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. "Wholeness." "Dad," Hugo said, tugging on my jacket. "Are the monsters gone now?" I looked down at my youngest son, thinking about the real monster we just defeated in court. "Yeah, buddy, the monsters are gone." 3 weeks after the custody hearing, the criminal trial began. Beatrice had been right about Vivian fighting back hard, but she'd underestimated how thoroughly we documented her crimes. The prosecution laid out a devastating case: forged signatures, fraudulent transfers, identity theft, and conspiracy with Alastair to commit financial fraud. The recordings Eleanor had provided painted a picture of two people systematically planning to destroy an innocent man's life. Alastair, faced with his own criminal charges, had already flipped. His testimony was the nail in Vivian's coffin. "She approached me 8 months ago," he testified. "She said her husband was an obstacle to her happiness and asked for my help in removing him from the picture. We started with small financial moves, then escalated to forgery and fraud. And the domestic violence allegations?" the prosecutor asked. "Those were her idea. She said if we could make him look dangerous, she could get everything in the divorce, and he'd be too discredited to fight back." When Vivian took the stand in her own defense, she tried to paint herself as a victim of an abusive marriage, but the evidence was overwhelming and her story fell apart under cross-examination. Mrs. Vivian Beatrice said during cross-examination, "You testified that you feared for your safety. Yet, you brought your alleged co-conspirator to your family home multiple times, exposing your children to him. Does that sound like the behavior of a fearful woman?" Vivian's composure finally split. "You don't understand. I built that life. I earned that money. He was just holding me back. So, you decided to steal $50,000 from his deceased aunt's inheritance. That money should have been mine anyway." The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge was unusually direct. "Mrs. Vivian, you didn't just commit financial crimes. You attempted to destroy a family, traumatize children, and frame an innocent man. This court sentences you to 5 years in state prison with restitution to be paid in full." As the bailiff led Vivian away in handcuffs, she looked back at me with pure hatred. But I felt nothing but pity for her. She'd had everything: a loving husband, beautiful children, a good life, and she'd thrown it all away for money and excitement. 6 months later, I was sitting on the porch of our house. Our house now, since Vivian had forfeited her rights to it, watching Hugo play in the yard. His nightmares had stopped completely, and his laughter was the most beautiful sound in the world. Leo had started his senior year with renewed confidence, and Clara was already talking about studying law. Inspired by our fight for justice, Eleanor visited regularly and slowly, carefully, I'd started dating again. Nothing serious yet, but the possibility of love felt real again. The business was thriving, especially after the local news coverage of our case. Turns out people respect a man who stands up for his family and fights for what's right. As I watched my children play, I thought about that night at the gala when Vivian gave me her ultimatum. She'd been so sure I'd crumble, that I'd take her abuse and walk away quietly. She'd been wrong about everything except one thing. I had walked away from her forever, but I'd taken my children, my dignity, and my future with me. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. 18 months after the trial ended, I found myself sitting in Dr. Sarah Chin's office with all 3 of my children. Family therapy had been court-mandated initially, but we'd continued it voluntarily because it was actually helping us heal together. Dr. Chin said, "How do you feel about the progress your family has made?" I looked at my kids. Leo was now a freshman at State University on a partial scholarship studying business. He turned into a young man I was incredibly proud of, someone who'd learned from his mother's manipulation and chosen integrity instead. Clara was a junior in high school, president of the debate team, and already talking about law school. And Hugo, my youngest, was just a normal 10-year-old kid who loved baseball and video games and hadn't had a nightmare in over a year. "We're stronger than we ever were before," I said. Honestly, the business was thriving too. After the local news coverage of our case, I'd gotten more clients than I could handle. Apparently, people respected a man who stood up for his family and fought for what was right. I'd hired 2 full-time employees and was considering opening a second location. But the biggest change was personal. 6 months ago, I'd married Eleanor in a small ceremony at the house. The kids had walked her down the aisle, and Hugo had been a ring bearer. It felt right in a way my first marriage never had, built on honesty, mutual respect, and genuine love. "Dad," Leo said during our session, "I want to apologize again for believing Mom's lies about you." "Son, you don't need to keep apologizing. You were 17 years old, and your mother was an expert manipulator. What matters is that you learned from it." "I did learn something," he continued. "I learned what real strength looks like. It's not about winning at any cost. It's about doing the right thing, even when it's hard." Dr. Chin smiled. "That's a very mature perspective, Leo." After the session, we stopped by the cemetery where Aunt Patricia was buried. I'd had a proper headstone installed with money from the recovered inheritance, and we visited every few months. "Tell us about Aunt Patricia again," Hugo asked as we placed flowers on her grave. "She was one of the strongest people I ever knew," I said. "She worked 2 jobs to put herself through nursing school, never married because she said she was too independent, and always stood up for what was right. She would have loved seeing you kids grow up." That evening, as I tucked Hugo into bed, he asked me something that caught me off guard. "Dad, do you think Mom will ever get better?" I considered my words carefully. Vivian was serving her sentence in a minimum security facility about 3 hours away. She'd written letters to the kids a few times, but they'd been manipulative attempts to gain sympathy rather than genuine apologies. "I hope so, buddy. But sometimes people make choices that hurt others, and they have to live with the consequences of those choices. Will you ever forgive her?" "I already have," I said, and realized it was true. Not because she deserves it, but because holding on to anger would hurt us more than it would hurt her. As I turned off his light, Hugo said sleepily, "I'm glad you're my dad." Those words meant more to me than any business success or legal victory ever could. Walking downstairs, I found Eleanor reading on the couch, and I sat down beside her. "Good day?" she asked, curling up against me. "Very good day," I replied, thinking about how far we'd all come. We'd been through hell and come out stronger on the other side. Not because we'd sought revenge, but because we'd chosen truth, integrity, and love over fear and manipulation. That was a victory worth fighting for. 5 years later, I stood in the same Riverside Convention Center where this whole nightmare had started. But this time, I was there for Leo's college graduation party. He'd finished his business degree with honors and had already been accepted to law school. The irony wasn't lost on me that we were celebrating in the same ballroom where Vivian had tried to humiliate me into submission. "Dad," Leo said, raising his glass during his speech to the gathered family and friends. "I want to thank the man who taught me that real strength isn't about winning at any cost. It's about standing up for what's right, even when everyone's watching and expecting you to fail." The applause was warm and genuine, filled with people who'd watched our family rebuild itself from the ground up. Clara was now in her first year at law school, following in Beatrice Vance's footsteps. She'd interned at Beatrice's firm the previous summer and had already helped several families going through similar situations. Hugo was 13, captain of his middle school baseball team, and the kind of kid who stood up for younger students getting bullied. The business had grown beyond my wildest dreams. Beaumont IT Solutions now had offices in 3 cities and employed 22 people. More importantly, we'd established a scholarship fund for children of single-parent families, kids who'd been through trauma and needed support to build better futures. Arthur Eleanor said, joining me on the balcony overlooking the party. "What are you thinking about?" "Just remembering that night 5 years ago when I walked out of here. I thought my life was over. And now I look back at the party. My children successful and happy. My wife who'd become a mother my kids deserved. Friends and employees who respected the business we'd built together. Now I realize it was actually just beginning." Eleanor smiled and handed me an envelope. "This came in the mail today. You might want to read it privately first." The return address made my stomach clench. It was from Vivian. I opened it carefully, unsure what to expect after years of silence. "Arthur," the letter began, "I know I have no right to contact you after everything I did. The therapy program here has helped me understand how sick I was, how my need for control and status destroyed the best thing I ever had. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I'm not asking to see the kids. I know I lost that right. I just wanted you to know that I'm genuinely sorry for the pain I caused. And I'm proud of the man you've always been and the father you continue to be. Take care of our children. Love them enough for both of us. Vivian." I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. Maybe she was sincere. Maybe it was another manipulation. It didn't matter anymore. Our lives had moved beyond her ability to affect them. "Everything okay?" Eleanor asked. "Everything's perfect," I said, and meant it. Later that night, after the last guest had gone home, I sat in my home office updating the scholarship fund records. In 5 years, we helped send 43 kids to college. Kids who might have been lost in the system, but now had chances to build better lives. I thought about that scared, confused man who had walked out of the convention center 5 years ago, unsure if he'd ever see his children again. He'd made the right choice that night, even though he couldn't see where it would lead. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is refuse to play someone else's game. Sometimes walking away is the first step toward walking into something better. And sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys really do win in the end.